Okay. Are we good?
Okay.
All right, great. Well, welcome everyone. We'll call to order this meeting of the Finance and Personnel Committee for October 15th, 2024. First item is the roll call.
And I roll.
Here.
Lorman.
Here.
And Jackson is not currently present, but anticipated.
Thank you. Next item is the the minutes of the October 1st, 2024 Finance and Personnel Committee meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes of the October 1st, 2024 Finance and Personnel Committee meeting are accepted as drafted. Next item is the audit of the bills. Do you have any additions, Bill?
I do. I have one addition. This is for Fifth Asset Inc. doing business as Debt Book. And it is for the annual subscription payment for the Debt Book software. That amount is $12,000.
Okay. So can I get a motion to approve the audit of the bills with the addition of the Debt Book annual subscription payment of $12,000?
I'll make that motion.
I will second it. Any discussion? Questions?
Nope.
I have a question for Bill. Is Debt Book all you thought it would be?
Yeah, I think it is. It works well. It does what we needed to do. I think when it comes up for renewal, we'll look at options and see if there's a lesser cost option that would work for us. Just because we have not found, as we've gotten into the subscriptions, that we have a large number of those. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, it is doing everything we needed to do.
Good. I like investing in technology that turns out to work. And I know MuniCode has been really popular. So it's good to know DebtBooks is working. Okay. All those in favor of approving the audit of the bills with the addition of $12,000 for the annual subscription payment of DebtBooks signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. The ayes have it. Moving on to resuming our discussion and deliberation over the 2025 budget. Just a reminder, this is a cost to continue services budget proposal. And last time we went through general fund operations and we had started on capital projects and left off with the planning department. So today we'll finish capital projects, discuss some miscellaneous items that maybe have been tweaked since our last meeting or that we haven't discussed yet, and make any last changes to suggest. I did send some questions related to the vehicle replacement plan to Brian and Bill, and we got those answers. And I also recently started talking with Sean in Public Works about moving some of the street projects. So we'll talk about those when we get to them. And Bill, there are no new revenues, sadly.
No, unlike last time, we don't have any updates of new or changing revenues available.
Okay. And it looks like we have $24,695 that we can allocate in the general fund. But I also learned today that the fire district is requesting an increase.
Yeah, that is, both those items are correct, that when we added up the final adjustments for the cost of living adjustments and the other changes from last week, the general fund currently has $24,695 available. The fire district has indicated that, seeing that the city is considering increasing the non-union cost of living adjustment from 2% to 2.5%, the fire commission is also going to be meeting to consider requesting a 2.5% increase for their cost of living adjustment. Middleton's share of that would be $2,627. So that lowers the available amount, if that were approved, to $22,068.
Okay. $22,068. Thank you. Okay. So if we could bring up the executive budget part of the packet.
Yeah, where would you like to start?
Well, we left
specifically?
off on
On capital?
planning. Yeah, the capital. We had gone through Parks, Recreation and Forestry, and we talked about the urban forestry master plan, which I see in there, and it's now, the actual cost is estimated at 16,000 with half of that being possibly available through a grant. Okay, but the 16,000 hasn't been added in. Can we add that in for now, just to give us a dollar amount at the end to start working towards? Okay. Chair of Conservancy Lands, do you support this urban forestry master plan going forward with 50% grant funding?
I do.
I do too. I think it's something our constituents will support too. So we just have to find 7,500 more. Okay, moving down to planning, the energy or the efficiency navigator program. As much as I appreciate that program, I'm looking forward to a presentation on it later tonight. I do think 150,000 is tough given our fiscal situation. And I want to make clear for any members of the public who are tuning in that the sustainable building guidelines are going forward. They're just going forward this year. So it's not a decision to not do that. It's just not going to be necessary in 2025. So maybe, I don't know if we can strike through that so that people don't misunderstand what's going on there. The Cayuga Connector multi-use path on the east side of Allen Boulevard and Lisa and Laura Lane streetscaping. This project, the Lisa and Laura Lane streetscaping, that one, I wonder if we can postpone to a future year. Welcome, Alder. If we could postpone that to a future year and use the funding in TID 5 to pay for the Century Allen intersection reconfiguration and signals, which right now is crossed out under Public Works Other. I feel like, I know we're doing the design right now for Century and Allen. This has been I suspect if we see the results of the all transportation modes plan, active transportation modes plan, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that Century and Allen is flagged as a hazardous intersection for pedestrians. So I really, if we're doing the design this year and we know it's a problem, it would be great if we could take care of that in 2025 and not have to wait on that. And I feel like safety wise, there's a bigger improvement for more people through that change than anything that might happen with Lisa and Laura Lane streetscaping. And I wonder, Abby, if you have any comments about that, welcome to share.
Just a couple of things to consider. Is this on? Oh, there we go. So the design for Lisa and Laura Lane streetscaping is complete. We just held it because we wanted to bid it in a more favorable time period. And we were thinking of trying to bid it in December or January. One of the things that's not showing up in there is a revenue stream from sidewalk assessments. So I haven't worked with our consultant to calculate how much, if the city council decided that you wanted to assess the cost of the sidewalk to the adjacent property owners, we still would have to cover the costs up front, but there would be income coming back into the city. Other than that, I don't see any major concerns with delaying it. I would just want to let our consultants know right away because they are kind of gearing up to bid it right now.
Okay. Abby, do you know approximately what the assessment might? No, that's okay.
Sorry.
Sure. No, that's fine. That's fine. Oh, and I also noted that there's a potential $96,000 savings by going with grass in the terrace instead of the colored pavement.
Yep.
Can you describe that? Why would we opt for pavement instead of a pervious surface?
The main reason is if you think that there will be enough foot traffic from people parking on Lisa Lane to go to the market. So it was basically a way for the market to spill over more like into the terrace with sidewalk cafe seating and things like that. And, you know, given that the market has been a little bit slower to start, there's really only one tenant in the space now. I personally would not opt for the hardscape pavement. Maybe at some point in the future, we'll find it necessary if there's like a lot of mud and the grass isn't growing there. But at this point, I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay, I am in agreement on that. Alder Jackson, this is your district, I believe. Do you have any concerns about holding off a year on the streetscaping so we can redo Century and Allen?
No, Century and Allen is a priority first.
All right, thank you. So if we take out that, and just to confirm, this is a TID 5 eligible expense, the Century and Allen.
Yeah, we did review the project plan, and street improvements of this nature are included in the project plan, as is this intersection location.
Okay. Thank you. All right, moving down, so that was still in planning. The bus stop improvements phase 2 for $15,000. That one I wonder about, just because I think it's to make the new articulated buses, the stops for those buses conform more to the length of the bus, right? And so I would like to try to find a way to get those changes made. It's just adding more, again, more pavement, but it's kind of necessary if you ever take one of these buses. You don't want to be stepping off into grass or snow. So can we temporarily put that one back in, maybe as a maybe? And we'll figure it out. Moving down then to the police department. So I noticed, unless it was just a couple requests or an enterprise fund, everybody got something docked. So I'm going to ask about the 4th priority here, the dispatch desk replacement project for $12,000. How urgent is that replacement?
Chief Hillenbrand is on the Zoom.
Oh, he is.
Ask him.
Hi, Chief. Can you speak to this dispatch desk replacement project?
Absolutely. It is not urgent. It'd be nice to have it replaced because it's not a functional desk right now, but I shouldn't say that. We can't raise it up and down like its intended purpose, but it's not urgent. We can do without it if it needs to be cut.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Colleagues, I would say, given the need for $15,000 for the bus stop to be improved, to configure better with the BRT buses, I would suggest we take this one off. Any objections?
No,
Since the chief is okay with
that
it.
chief is okay with it.
Okay.
It's not an urgent need, so.
Thank you. And then that takes us to, well, I didn't have any others for the police department. So members, if as we're going through this, if something jumps out, please speak up. Then we get to Public Works Streets.
My question, I guess,
Sure.
was more for Abby, just on the Allen Boulevard, Century. Century's gonna get redone, right? In what, 2027 or so?
Sure.
That'll be a Sean.
Yeah,
Sean.
sure.
I just want, if we're gonna spend money, I just want to make sure we don't backpedal on things. So whatever we do now will fit in with whatever is going to happen in the future.
Yeah, we want to get this Century and Allen signalization bundled with the Q&M signalization because we're trying to upgrade some really old equipment and at the same time do some pedestrian crossing alignment and geometric changes really to get pedestrians in a more prominent location. You know how they zigzag across that intersection right now.
Absolutely.
In 2027 is the county's anticipated timeline for the bridge project just west of Branch Street. And then in 2029 is the anticipated resurfacing of Century Avenue.
Okay.
I mean, for as long as I've lived here, and that's my only corridor out, as a bicyclist or pedestrian, I've never, ever crossed at Century and Allen.
Because,
To Allen.
Because it's so,
You just can't,
yeah,
just,
I have, but it's not my favorite.
yeah.
yeah, I cross, at Dewey Court.
Yeah, it actually seems safer to cross, to take your chances for when the traffic is light, to cross anywhere besides that intersection. So, Okay.
Just reality.
yeah, so we're in agreement.
Thank you.
But Sean, you can stick around because we're on Public Works now.
Sean, poor Sean.
So, okay, where'd my pen go? Sign that, thank you. So the High Road as a project has come up a lot because of the proposed, well, the ongoing development at Red Tail Ridge and now the proposed development of the Ziegler Farm property.
Right.
And you're aware that Misty Valley residents have long wanted action on High Road. It is literally crumbling on the edges. And we had put it in the budget for 2028 because it seemed like it might take that long to work out jurisdictional cooperation with our colleagues in the two other towns. But now tonight, we're actually considering the annexation of that property. So with all that said, I wonder if we can move High Road into the budget for design in 25 and reconstruction in 2026. And I recognize that's a big project, but we also, according to the narrative for this capital project, once the payment is made by Viridian for the Ziegler Farm development, we would have $1.4 million thereabouts, which would almost cover the cost. And so I'm inclined, again, thinking about safety. I see all the traffic that goes on that road. And I also see all the people who walk on the road. And I can't help but think if we did if we looked at the data, there'd be way more traffic on High Road than on Mayflower, Boulder, and Columbus. So I wonder if that reconstruction project, which is scheduled for design in 25 and reconstruction in 26, I wonder if we could bump that one and move up High Road.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know of any pressing reason. We've already bumped Mayflower once from a couple of years ago. It certainly can be moved. Yeah, there's nothing pressing about it.
And any objections? I don't know if is that in your district?
No.
Alder Lorman? Okay.
But I wanted to point out, it's not in the published packet.
The Mayflower one or the High Road one? Yeah, it's in the full packet. It's in the original, I can,
It's notes, but okay.
Yeah,
So
the sheet in the packet for tonight's meeting just had the 2025 projects. This was in the total capital budget book because it was an out year project scheduled originally for 27 and 28.
Okay.
And that's what I have up on the screen here.
Yeah, I see that. I just wanted to.
and if you give me 1 second. Oh, no.
That, obviously all the development that's going out, that whole area is obviously very much on my radar because of some of the items lower down on our list that right now red flagged in terms of traffic calming. Just wondering about the whole impact of all the traffic that's going to continue to go out High Road, out Parmenter, down Old Creek. There's no other arteries to get that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And if we really need to keep also some of the traffic calming.
Yeah, when we
that.
get to that,
Mhm.
I'm in agreement that some of that. Right, I mean, it's kind of like whack-a-mole, isn't it? To always be trying to figure out where, if we do something here, what's that going to do to traffic somewhere else? Okay, so I'm trying to find it here it is. It, just for your reference, Alder, it's page 181 of
Okay.
the original capital budget book. And yeah, it says as expected escrow total of 1.4 million nearly meets projected costs, and that's contributions in the past from Misty Valley and also from Red Tail Ridge. And then an expected contribution eventually soon from Sigler. Okay, so we're construction, yep. And that is, would that be in the capital budget or would that be in grants, donations and other because we have escrow?
Well, the construction portion would be, the thought was that we were paying for design.
Okay. Okay. And while that is a good thought, is there any option to use some of the escrow towards the design?
I think we could, because we were really just collecting that in lieu of developers building their portion of their frontage of that road.
Because I'm just thinking of the $35,000. If this is 120 and mound design was 85, we have to make up the difference somewhere. And I'd rather have it be from the escrow fund than from another project. Then moving into, did anybody have anything else, questions about streets for Public Works? The bridge replacement money, is that that's for land, correct?
Let me just jump ahead here. So I'm looking at the same numbers. Yeah, the $50,000 was just for real estate.
Is it 50 or 500?
Oh, I'm sorry. That was for our portion of the design.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm still back up on streets, but yes.
Oh, sorry.
County Highway M bridge replacement.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Boy, can we jump over to the description of that just so I'm not misremembering? Because that's too much for, design. That's got to include land acquisition.
It says land and then cont. I don't know what
Oh,
the
real estate.
real estate, okay. Okay. And that, do you think will be sufficient?
That should be more than enough because a lot of it's already city land.
Okay,
We're
Good
trying
to
to
know.
keep the design pretty tight.
okay, great. Moving on then to Public Works, excuse me. We already did the Century and Allen. Oh no, wait, we skipped ahead. We wanted to talk about Old Creek, correct? Yeah, can we go back to Public Works Streets, number 11? So the $25,000 that is taken out right now, the original request, was that to do all the stuff that's recommended or just to start it?
That was actually to hire a consultant to pick up the process with
Oh.
the neighbors because I
It's all-
just don't have time to meet their desire for the schedule.
Okay. And
I think this is
Go
just the
ahead.
kind of trend we're gonna have to, this is gonna be a reality. We're gonna have to hire consultant services for any project like this.
make sure you speak into your microphone so people can hear.
Sorry.
That's okay. How much does it cost to put in a pork chop?
It's probably in the ballpark of $5,000, not terribly expensive.
It almost seems like if we know a pork chop has been requested and voted on, I don't know. I'm just trying to, I totally respect consultants and the work that they do. It's vital, especially when we can't provide our own staff for it. But I'm reluctant to, I don't know, Alder Lorman, this is your district as much as, well, more than it is mine. I guess we share it.
We share.
I'd be inclined to keep $25,000 in, and perhaps this year we can find out from our constituents where they feel they are in the process. Do you know, has the survey gone out?
No, we didn't identify an affected area. It seemed like the neighbors had gone off and held many meetings and come up with a list of things that we should do. But we never sort of circled back and said, oh, here are the problems that these things would address. Just here's the solution.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a real long list of basically ideas that they've come up with. And in, my discussions with them and my advice to them every step of the way was, that's great. It's lots and lots of ideas. But in the end, it will be up to the professionals, the engineers,
Mhm.
to make recommendations as to what we should do.
Well, and really, part of our process is to have a neighborhood workshop. So it's never a small steering committee that drives the whole thing. It's in conjunction with staff, and then there's the vote by everyone who's affected, so that it's not misrepresenting the level of interest of the area that is going to use those roads.
Right. I mean, I guess there's two pieces to it. One is, do the residents who live in the area want something done?
Mhm.
Yay, nay, the survey. And then the other piece of it is, okay, working on an assumption that they want something done, what do we do? Is it a pork chop?
Mhm.
Is it speed bumps? Is it reconfiguration of signage, intersection, and that's where I, back away and say, that's where we looked to the professionals and say, okay, here's what's there. What do you recommend? Kind of a scenario. And I think what the message from the residents are, they want something. And that's it.
I don't disagree. And that's where we try to tie that back to data.
Yeah, exactly. And so, $25,000 is price to collect data. And I'm looking long-term about this because there's just going to be more traffic in that area. I mean, as we develop out there and we put those developments in, more and more people are going to be taking these roads, Old Creek, Pheasant Branch, and High Road. So I guess the question is, do we commit to doing something now to keep it moving down that road, or do we have a long-term commitment to say, we will do something, we just can't afford to do it now? I mean, it's,
Mhm.
I want to be practical about it.
Sure. Well, and I also want to reward residents for getting engaged and trying to problem solve. Or at the very least, I don't want to penalize them or hold them back if they've been making a lot of progress on their own. They took this up. And so I want to make sure that we can help them get to the point that the folks on North High Point have gotten with their traffic calming. So I'd be inclined to try to keep this 25,000 in the budget.
And I would support that, obviously.
Okay. Thank you. Then moving on through the Public Works other, I see the North Lake subdivision culvert maintenance. That's not included. And is that because it can go into, I think we talked about this, can that go into the stormwater utility, or is it just not something that the city is responsible for?
Yeah, it's always one of those tough questions, and we're feeling our way through that
Okay.
a bit at a time. But we've been viewing culverts more akin to storm sewers, which the storm water utility has not yet taken on as a class of assets. So we're just calling it storm sewer for right now.
Okay. Okay, so feeling your way. All right. Moving on to the Public Works fleet additions. I see the two trucks have come off. I understand the Ford F-115 Lightning, 150 Lightning is because we just recently got the one that we ordered for evaluation. I mean, to be our truck, but also to see if we want to get more. So that makes sense.
Mhm.
We'll talk about the vehicle replacement plan soon. Sewer utility, no changes. Again, it's a enterprise, so all the costs will be billed to the fees. Stormwater utility, I just wanted to note that the first two projects are not included in our original budget book. And so, and actually, I think the first two were different projects than are showing even in here, but it doesn't matter. Tell me about the leaf picker and Vector. And I see it's 85% stormwater utility funded. So we need to find out how Public Works or who's going to pay for the other 15.
Yeah, Bill, I remember you had some thoughts on how to finance that. I think it was with retirement of a different piece.
Yeah, so I had noted that there are other current assets, vehicle assets of the city that would be used by the stormwater utility if the referendum passes and there's additional stormwater utility
okay.
staff. And when an asset is being used by an enterprise fund, they're paying for a cost of that asset. So I think one option would be for the stormwater utility to front the full cost of this vehicle and then to go through an accounting of both this asset as well as other assets and what's the appropriate split between stormwater and the general capital. So I think that that would be a way to finance this with stormwater utility covering the cost of this vehicle. And even though the final allocation, they'll have 85% of this vehicle, they'll also be paying a small share towards some of our existing vehicles that would be used by the stormwater utility. That's one option to consider.
Okay. That sounds like a reasonable approach, rather than trying to work in 15% of $340,000 into the Public Works budget at this time.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of the things that we missed as a gap in preparing budgets, that there was that expectation. So I just didn't know.
Yep. Well, when you see everything that's in the budget, it's easy to understand how that could happen. So since the very next group is the vehicle replacement plan, I just want to acknowledge that we have gotten feedback from constituents, my district, and I guess, I don't know if that's Alder Madden's district. I ran for council because I wanted to see us take stronger action on climate change. I appreciate the information that we got from Public Works, Brad maybe, on costs for fuel and the explanation for things like not building the cost or not comparing or preparing in the budget to pay the life cycle cost, because of course the life cycle cost includes operations, gas, maintenance. It's not a capital project. So they're only looking at the capital cost, which I get, but I do think the city needs to go in the direction of doing life cycle cost analyses because it matters.
Sure.
So I'm hoping with the soon to be reviewed and I hope approved sustainable purchasing policy implementation guide, I'm hoping that this is the last year that we'll have a budget that isn't shaped to some extent by that policy. Meaning I hope next year we'll see life cycle cost analyses for equipment and vehicles. And I hope we'll see a return to what we had last year, which was a column for the cost of an internal combustion engine vehicle versus and then another column for hybrid or EVs. That said, I do want to make it clear to residents that it isn't the city staff. The reason the implementation guide for the sustainable purchasing policy hasn't been completed is not anything intentional on the part of the staff. I mean, when I left the committee a couple of years ago, we had just finished the policy itself and had started the implementation guide. So I am as much to blame for the delay in the implementation guide being done as anybody else is, because I left the committee and I was the one in charge of that particular project. I was appointed to different committees. So I know they've been meeting with the committee, sustainability committee's been meeting with the staff because they want to have buy-in. I have heard positive feedback from the folks who have, the sustainability committee members who have been in on those meetings expressing surprise and delight that it sounds like the staff really are interested in doing this, but they don't have the guidance. They don't always have the tools available that, people who are steeped in this work have, and they don't have the past history with council to make them comfortable suggesting large increases or any increases in the costs of things when they can get a cheaper alternative through Ford, for example. And so I have made it clear that I'm willing to consider higher costs for achieving our meeting our needs and also achieving our goals. I think the replacement of the furnaces at the senior center with the air source heat pump at a cost of $120,000, not for the appliance itself, but for the electrical reconfiguring that would need to be done. That's a clear example where it's not a good idea to make that investment. And we won't make those investments unless the cost comparison and the life cycle costs are similar. So I understand that this leaf picker and vector is a necessary piece of equipment. Yes?
Well, we don't really have a secondary vector right now. Really, we just borrow from the water and sewer utility.
Okay.
But if we have a crew whose expectation is that they'll be picking up leaves and sumps, cleaning out storm sumps more frequently, it's just not available right now.
Okay. And would this still be on the stormwater utilities list of things to purchase if the referendum does not pass?
I'm not sure that there would be capacity for
That's
that.
what okay.
Right.
So if the referendum does pass, because residents want to see us do more to keep our water clean, this is exactly the type of purchase we want to be able to make so that we can have simultaneous use of these vehicles or a backup, each, the two different utilities having their own, so that stormwater can get out there and have leaf pickup.
Right, because the streets crew also uses it to put in street sign bases and those, kinds of things. So it gets used quite a lot.
I would like to see this vehicle someday be on the list for possible conversion to biodiesel. I know that's something that the Sustainability Committee has talked to Public Works about in the past, emulating Madison and what they do with biodiesel. So as much as I wish there were an electric version that we could purchase, I see the value of this particular vehicle as polluting as it may be.
Could I interject too? I just
Sure.
want to mention the 1-ton truck under stormwater utility number 11 in
Yes.
the grid here. Brad and Eric were mentioning that even though it looks like that's the lowest rated item and first on the chopping block, it was just a late addition, which is why it's lowly rated. It is intended as the crew's main transport for personnel and tools, and they wanted me to pass that along.
So does stormwater utility, again, thinking about this is this an item that they would want even if the referendum did not pass?
Well, we wouldn't have the personnel or the tasks associated with this truck. So if we hire the people and give them something to do, they'll need a way to get there. Otherwise, they won't.
Okay. Help me understand what a 1-ton truck is. Like, why do we have the specificity of a Ford F-550 or a Ford F-150? And then this is like a generic.
That's a fair question, and I don't have a good answer for it. It's just, basically a heavy duty pickup.
I don't suppose a Ford F-150 Lightning could handle it? Maybe.
Not as far as I'm aware, because it has the capacity to be able to, it has a bigger box than a standard pickup truck would. It's almost like a mini dump truck. I'll explain it that way. Really mini.
Mini dump.
So it's a lower height and smaller box on it.
Okay. So if that is put back in, that would I mean, that also would come from the stormwater utility.
From the utility, if
Yeah.
there's the referendum, correct.
Is there a reason it can't be put in contingent on that in this, or does that? mess
Yeah.
up the accounting?
Right. Alderwoman's wondering,
Sorry.
I think a lot of what's in stormwater utility is contingent on the referendum passing. And maybe that's a fair note to put in for this specifically, that maybe we put that in so that everyone has a good understanding of what's at stake.
Yeah, I will add that note specifically for these items. If the stormwater utility referendum does not pass, when we have the meeting with the full council on November 6th, we will need to look at adjustments across the entire budget due to the impact of that.
Okay, well, fingers crossed in so many ways. Okay, moving on to then and thank you for that clarification, Sean, because that was not my understanding. The vehicle replacement plan funding, the one thing I want to make clear in here is I totally think, and I don't know if the chief is still on, the police interceptors. I don't see any reason why we can't make it a plan to get hybrids. I know supply in the past was a problem, but these are fairly young vehicles. So even though they do, they're due for replacement, I feel like if we can wait a year or whatever to get the Vector, we can wait 6 months to even a year to get the replacement hybrids, given that we have great mechanics on staff and these cars are exceptionally well cared for. Chief, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. So one of the problems and the reason why the hybrids have been not a priority is that we couldn't get them the last couple of years until, in fact, we were told in 2024, don't even bother putting in for them because they're not going to be made. Within the last week or two, we were told that hybrids are now back on the line and we could get them. So I'm told that those are going to be the top priorities, the hybrids, not the gasoline engines that I think were initially proposed in the budget.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then I noted one of the cars is listed for keeping another year use as a school vehicle. I assume that means an SRO vehicle.
That's correct. That's our older vehicles get handed down to the SROs because they're not used as often. So yes, that's for one of our SROs.
Okay. And we wouldn't, I mean, could that 2020 be used? The 2020 Interceptor be used? And is it just 1 year? I guess that's the bigger thing. Would we just keep that for a year? How does the SRO use it? Or is it the case that the SRO for some portion of the year would use it as a regular police vehicle, not just for school-related purposes?
That's a good question. It does get used in patrol when it's needed. There are many times when we don't have any vehicles available if one's down or multiple ones are down or involved in an accident. So it does get used in patrol, especially in the summer months. But the main purpose is it's probably got high mileage and we've had a lot of maintenance issues. So to try to limp it along, we give it to the SROs because it's not used as often. I guess I would defer to Brian and the mechanics if they think it can go another year. We really defer to them on when we need to get these vehicles replaced.
Okay. Thank you for that, Chief.
You're welcome.
Kylie, as long as we've got you here, I wonder if you could comment on the two Parks trucks. They're both Ford F-150s, and I'm wondering if either of those or both of those could be the EV one, the Lightning.
We wouldn't be able to put string trimmers in the back, like the bed of the truck isn't large enough to store all the equipment that's needed on them. And they also don't allow to carry or to hitch up all the trailers with all the mowers that are on the back. They're extremely inefficient. They've been testing the EV Lightning out. So that's been something they've noted as far as just transportation of any trailered equipment. They wouldn't be able to do that. So then I wanted to look into that a little bit further on that Lightning because I'm not confident that they'd be able to do their jobs then. So
Okay, so you're saying Ford is making a truck that can't fit tools or,
Or
Oh.
the EV, that Lightning, the new one that was just, now put into, I think, Public Works is something that they've been starting to try out. And I know I, connected with them on it just to see as far as, all the trailers, that's basically how we do all snow and mow. And that, would be inefficient if it doesn't work, for hauling all that.
I guess I would like confirmation of that. I can do my own research, but I also would wonder if there's a different F-150 Lightning configuration that might, a different model that's out there.
I think the problem with it is it has a crew cab. They really don't make, then people aren't making like a pickup truck like it's supposed to be anymore, which is, you know,
And we
You don't
have
need
our
a crew-
tool.
you don't need a
Um,
crew cab and you don't need a nice interior. And there's so many
Yeah.
things you don't need for a work vehicle that all these vehicles have. They're really a luxury vehicle that happens to be a pickup truck, unfortunately. I have looked at them quite a bit and they don't have the weight capacity and towing capacity that's practical.
They're more like a
They-
car. It's like
Yeah, I
a
mean,
car for.
they
someone
would
who-
if they could, but I think they're selling them for a different market space than a real utility vehicle.
Okay.
Maybe no one else has anything. That's what I would wonder.
Yeah, well, and I think this is another reason why it makes sense for Middleton to eventually branch out beyond Ford, because I know there's the Climate Mayors Collaborative has like a purchasing collaborative for electric vehicles and other equipment. We don't take advantage of that, even though believe we're still members of the Climate Mayors. But we don't take advantage of that because of the preference for Ford. I'm inclined to start trying different products that meet our needs and also help us achieve our goals. Okay, thanks, Kylie. And then looking at the rest of these, the Water Resources Commission has flood mapping and water utility has meter replacement. One thing that I don't see on here is solar on, I forget what number wells, but there are 2 wells that in the past, we've got it in our ARPA or had it in our ARPA list. 2 wells getting solar and we took it off of ARPA because it seems like since it's related to the water utility, it should go on that. Does anybody know the status of that project?
I can tell you, I don't know it well enough to answer, but I can find out.
Okay, thanks, John.
Yeah, and I recall as we were going over the water utility budget, I think that as the manager of the utility was putting this together, they were focusing on the projects that they need to complete for their DNR compliance for next year. And he had indicated that he was going to work with Kelly on the initial planning that had been done and look into that. So I think it is something that he is aware of, that there is interest in, but given the amount of large projects they have this year, it wasn't something he had put in for 2025.
Okay. All right. Okay, thanks. All right, so we worked through the capital projects and last time we worked through the operating budget for general fund. So let's go through, I guess I would call it miscellaneous and other, final thoughts. One thing I wanted to note is there was an effort by the Dane County Library Board to try to increase revenue to libraries by charging or allocating some of the funding based on programming, not just circulation. It did not pass. If it had, the library, or it did not get adopted. And if it had, the library here would have gotten on the order of 45,000 extra dollars. So I'm mentioning it now because I want my colleagues to be aware of it. If it comes before the new county executive next year, I think it would be important for Middleton's Common Council to pass a resolution supporting that action and do what we can to help make it happen. We had talked about wanting to fund, and Bill, maybe you want to bring up the part of the decision matrix for the general fund operating. We wanted to try to find the money to pay for our human resources assistant full-time, which means we need to come up with $57,005. Bill noted, what's the difference again? Excuse me, what is our balance once we take out the fire district? 22,068.
Yep, I can show that addition. And then I did neglect to mention something when you'd asked about if there are any other revenue updates. We do have the $2,500 in revenue from Adams Outdoor Advertising that was not included in the original requested budget. So that $2,500 could be added in.
Okay, that's good. So that leaves us. You doing the math there, Bill?
We're at 22,428 with that change, and let me add in the Adams. I think I had, because I added that row, it's not adding into the total, so I'm just
That's
gonna
okay.
manually add that for the moment. So that we are back to 24,928 at this point.
That's what we need to come up with?
Yep. And I'm just gonna add the.
Okay, so one way to get a little extra revenue is, and I've talked about this a lot, we get cost recovery for our various enterprises into the general fund. The only exception right now is the airport, and we've talked about moving in the direction of parity among our enterprises and not creating an exception. I'm wondering if I think the golf course pays a percentage of their revenue.
Yeah, golf course is structured as a percentage of their revenue. It's approximately 3% of their revenue. The other enterprise funds, it's based on a percentage of costs within the general fund. So looking at things like administration, finance, IT, and allocating a percentage of those services to that utility.
Okay. I'm inclined to suggest that we look at maybe a 2% cost recovery from the revenues of the airport.
Yeah, and a 2% looking at the city administrator who staffs the airport commission would be approximately $4,000.
Okay. And then that leaves us some money we still need to find. And what about the placemaker planner? I know that's an important ask. I really do. I kind of feel like the whole concept needs to be examined closely. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not sure I'm ready to support that particular position. Or, I mean, could we increase to a 3/4 time position? Would that help us get to where we need to be with the HR assistant? Or is there another option? We had talked about possibly using some of our surplus this year for some parks maintenance or pruning.
Yeah, so to touch on that question about the surplus this year, and one item we'll get to later in the agenda, we have prepared projections for the general fund based on third quarter revenues and expenditures. We're estimating a little over a $400,000 surplus in the general fund. That's primarily coming from revenues, and the largest of those is interest income. I think that even with interest rates starting to come down in the later part of the year, that's hopefully a conservative estimate. We also have some savings from vacancies that we've had in positions on the expenditure side. So out of that 400,000, some of the items we've discussed during the budget process are one-time items that could be purchased out of that. Some things like the mock tools was an item. The EMS chief recruitment process consultant was another. One of the items that I think we had discussed and could be done is some of the increases in the pruning costs for parks that was included both as a $50,000 request on the operating budget, and I believe it was a $75,000 increase in the capital side. Some or both of those could be funded by surplus as well, at least for the next year. It still creates an issue in future years of needing to fund that at a higher level, but would help with getting caught up with some of the backlog that's been in place.
Okay. Well, I like the idea of thinking about that to make sure that we can afford everything that's on this list. Can we see what and I'm mindful of the time, at 6:30, we'll switch over to our regular business agenda and come back to this when we're done.
Yeah,
Um,
where did you want me to go?
all the
Sorry.
way to the end.
Okay.
I just wanted to see what the bottom line is.
Yeah, so this number on the top is pulling in the total. So this with the changes that we've made, the 4,000 cost recovery for the airport, the additional money from Adams Outdoor Advertising, and the adjustment for the fire district COLA, we're at just under 29,000 currently.
Okay. And that we might be able to make up with the surplus.
Yeah,
by
I think
moving
if
some of the
you
pruning.
if you were looking at the pruning item, there's 25,000, an increase of 25,000 currently in the operating budget. If that were shifted over to surplus, that would bring this up by 25,000. So we'd be, and just add that in so we can see the total. So that brings us to 53,900.
So we're still a few $1,000s.
We're approximately $3,000
Okay.
short.
All right. Let's make a note that we're still looking for 4K. And we'll come back to that at the end of our regular business session. So we're going to move on for now, but we will come back to this. Let's move on to resolutions. First one is resolution 2024-49 requesting exemption from Dane County library tax. Can I get a motion to approve?
We approve that.
All right, Alder Jackson, would you like
This is
to?
Jackson, I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving resolution 2024-49 requesting exemption from Dane County library tax signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on to our second resolution, resolution 2024-50, approving a tax increment financing or TIF bond for the 3810 Parmenter Street Phase 2 development. And this comes to us from staff and city attorney. Would someone like to?
This is
move
Jackson, I'll
approval?
make a motion to approve resolution 2024-50.
Thank you.
Gorman will second.
Thank you. Discussion.
Where you had some questions about some differences in language between the resolution and the TIF bond.
Yep.
I just wanted to suggest that perhaps you may want to make this subject to final approval by the city attorney if there were any adjustments that you were looking at from that, Matt. I'm not sure where that was left.
I thought I did send you some slides. So
I think you did make some,
yeah, I
Slides.
mean, the difference in language really wasn't material to begin with. Some of it was necessary because you're talking in the resolution about things that are happening in the bond, so you had to say instead of here under, there under, and
Sure.
those kind of references. And there was one other little phrase that
At the
there was a
source of-
slight, there was a
Mhm.
slight variance. So I changed that to match, but everything else was
okay.
consistent.
And
So,
you'll
I mean, I think
make
we
a
should
note
be
in
all
the
right.
template for those documents?
Yeah, I'm not sure why that wasn't the
It's-
same.
And Alders, we're talking about that there are two bold paragraphs, and bold means important, right? And I just happened to notice that the wording was slightly different enough to make me wonder. So I appreciate that explanation and the changes. Okay. If there's no other discussion, all those in favor of approving resolution 2024-50, approving a tax increment financing or TIF bond for the 3810 Parmenter Street Phase 2 development signify by saying aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on now to agreements and contracts. We have 3. Matt, do any of these need city attorney review and approval?
Well, for the proposed amendment,
That one, sure.
that one would have to, I think we
Yep.
have to decide, that one actually
Yep.
would have to be.
And our action on this next one, we've got the representatives are here, I see, yes. So we'll hear from them, and then the action you're looking for from us is a decision or recommendation on which approach to take.
That was my thought, that there would be a recommendation on the approach to take, and then Matt Fleming could work with WHPC to draft a modified version of an amendment that could come back for action at a future meeting.
Okay,
But the other two are, I've taken a look at and are fine.
okay. Would you like to say a few words about this, please? Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Mike Slavish with WHPC. Lee Furter, who's our Senior VP and General Counsel, is also here. For those of you who may not know much about Wisconsin Housing Preservation Corp., we are the state's largest owner and developer of affordable housing with over 9,000 units throughout the state. We're based in Madison. We actually have 3 projects here in the city of Middleton: Trotta, Kestrel, and one other off of Allen Parkway. So I'm not going to rehash all the analysis that Bill and staff put together, but I do want to refer, if I could, back to the original agreement that we executed with the city of Middleton. And I refer to you section 3 of that agreement to make a pilot. And that is, upon approval of the owner's application for tax exemption, the city and owner recognize the exemption would exempt the project from all real estate and personal property tax. And that was the premise in which we proceeded to buy this asset from Impact 7 and proceed. We also agreed to make a $91,000 pilot payment to the city that would go on in perpetuity for as long as we own that asset with a 2% annual escalator. So that was essentially the deal. And as a not-for-profit, we can exert tax exempt status by meeting certain safe harbor requirements by the state of Wisconsin. And they are, in summary, we can have 25% of the units at market. The other 75% of the units, either 40% would be at 60% AMI or 50% at 20%. No, 20% at 50%. And the balance would have to be at 80% AMI or less. Probably more than you want to know. But as long as we meet those requirements, we realize our safe harbor requirements and we will be tax exempt by state statute. That was the model that we had proposed here. And so when we applied for tax exemption under this agreement with, as we interpreted it, full exemption, which is what it says here. When the city came back and said, oh, well, we have to charge you taxes on those 25% units, that was, in our opinion, not in the spirit of the agreement that was executed with the city back in December of 22. So credit to staff. We did meet with them and they did agree to make some changes to this to make us whole but it was only going to make us whole through 2036 when that TIF expired. So when the TIF rebate, which is what's part of the new proposal, burns off, then we would go back to paying full rate. And that was not what we understood and contemplated under this agreement. So really, that's what we're here to certainly answer any questions for you for the committee. We feel as though we proceeded in good faith under this agreement, and that changed based on the position that the assessor took. Lee, I don't know if you have anything else to say about that.
And I trust the city has proceeded in good faith as well, Bill?
So I think so a little bit of background. So the city originally had an agreement with Impact 7 for a TIF project. And one of the discussions at the time that original TIF agreement was put in place is that because there would be an affordable housing component here, that if the city were providing TIF assistance, there would be an agreement that the property owner would not seek tax exemption, nor would they sell it to an entity that would seek tax exemption. When there were discussions between WHPC and Impact 7 for WHPC to take on the purchase, they indicated that they would be interested in seeking tax exemption. And the direction from the council at that time was that the city would be open to modifying the TIF agreement to allow the sale to a tax exempt entity seeking tax exemption, but under the condition that the city would be made whole compared to the revenue that it would received under the original TIF agreement. And during the life of the TIF district, the property would receive a large portion of the taxes paid back as a TIF incentive. But after the TIF district expires in 2036, then the property would be continuing to pay taxes based on the full value at that time, and there would be no additional TIF rebates. When we negotiated the pilot agreement with WHPC, the expectation was that they would be applying for and receiving a full property tax exemption, and the amount of the pilot was calculated accordingly. However, when they made the application for the tax exemption and it was reviewed by the city assessor determined that the property would only be 75% tax exempt. Recognizing that the original pilot amount was calculated based on an assumption of full tax exemption, we initially looked at prorating the pilot so that the pilot would be reduced by 25%. And in discussions with WHPC and them explaining that even with that proration and the amount of taxes they would be paying, they would still be paying more. We further discussed that and came up with the option that was listed in the packet as recommended pilot. That would lower the annual pilot from that base of $91,000 to $54,250. I think we were conceptually in agreement with that number for the life of the TIF. The question is what happens after the expiration of the TIF when the city is no longer able to provide a TIF incentive. And that is really the difference. We felt as staff that we were not able to recommend a further reduction at that time based on the original direction of the council that the city was to be made whole in revenue. Certainly, I understand WHPC's perspective as well, that if they're not receiving the TIF incentive anymore, paying the pilot and paying taxes on 25% of the building, their costs would be higher than they originally anticipated. So that's the point that we're at.
Okay. And so if the tax assessor had agreed that they would be completely tax exempt, the original pilot amount in the table, that is what the city would be getting
Yeah, it would have been a base of 91,000 with a 2% escalator each year.
through 2052.
That was set up in perpetuity, unless
In perpetuity.
status
As
of the
long as
property
we own the
changes.
property
Right.
under this structure, that is correct.
Okay. And that $91,000, how much of that does the city get to retain?
That would be fully retained by the city.
Okay. Whereas property taxes that are paid to the city, we don't retain 100%.
Correct. Yeah. During the TIF, there would be a portion of the taxes that are based on the base value that are split between all the taxing jurisdictions. But most of the taxes during the life of the TIF would be retained by the city through the TIF district. However, after the end of the TIF district, the city would only receive its share of the property taxes, which would be somewhere between 25 and 30%.
Okay. And do we have other properties in, well, for example, so is the Kestrel
Kestrel, yes. correct.
tax exempt?
It is, and we make a pilot payment there. However, there are no market rate units at Kestrel.
Okay.
That was part of the agreement that was made at that time. They're all 80% or less.
And refresh my memory, how many of the units are market rate in the Trotta building?
25% of 126 units.
Okay. And
So just one other clarification, and the notion about being made whole. So under the Impact 7 agreement, if you recall, again, they were going to keep it on the tax rolls, get TIF payment. But of those 126 units, only 50 of those were affordable. The rest were all market rate. The additional agreement that we made to the city when we entered into these negotiations with the city back in 2022 is that we would retain that. They would still be 50 units at that 60% AMI. However, we added another 44 units at 80% AMI. So taking the affordability from 50 units up to 94 units. So that was also part of the agreement. So then our opinion, that notion of being financially whole is not entirely accurate because the city at the time, was looking for more workforce housing units. We were willing to do that and commit to that long-term as part of this agreement as well.
well, and I mean, we greatly appreciate that you're making workforce housing units available. We, of course, have a dire need for more. I'm wondering what is the likelihood that you would make the remaining 25% workforce housing and then qualify for the 100%?
Full tax exemption.
Mhm.
Good question. If we do that, we realize we calculated about a $55,000 per year loss in income. The difference between the market rate units and arguably the 80% units.
Okay.
Would we consider that though? I mean, if there was some way to adjust for that, I mean, we're an affordable housing developer. We're not for profit. That's what we do. We're not about market rate housing, but sometimes we leave that in the formula just to, shore up the economics on a project, which allows us to offer the balance of those units at affordable rents.
Well, recognizing that loss would not be making you whole, what about, I noticed that the period for having let's see, it's 40% at 60% AMI, 35% at 80, and the rest at market for a period of 15 years. What about extending that beyond 15 years to maybe 30 years?
I think we would consider that. We need to, kind of depends on the overall terms that we agree to, but again, that's what we do. That's our mission. We're not for profit.
Yep.
As long as we own that asset, if it would run with our ownership, then I believe we'd entertain that condition.
Okay, Matt, are you noting that as a possibility?
Yeah.
And then that takes us back to the table, that Bill, I think Bill prepared this. The prorated pilot versus the WHPC proposal versus the recommendation. So again, recognizing everybody wants to be made whole, however we define that. I'm looking at the recommendation from the finance department and thinking that seems reasonable.
To the city.
To the
Again,
city.
does it seem reasonable to us beyond years 2036? It is reasonable up to that point, out of fairness to the city.
And if I can add,
Yes.
it's also, I think, important to understand that when the original agreement was, and one of the terms of the original agreement was the TIF agreement goes away as it relates to
Mhm.
this property. So the make whole thing beyond the TIF district, the city would have gotten zero taxes because the assumption was full tax exemption in perpetuity as long as WHPC was the owner. So I don't even really understand the make whole argument post the TIF district for that reason.
Bill, thank you for that. Bill, would you like to clarify?
Yeah, under the original agreement with Impact 7, there was a provision that even after the expiration of the TIF district and TIF incentives, that the property would remain taxable at least through 2052. So at that point, the city would be receiving its share of the full value of the building, so 100% of the building being taxable, and the city would receive its 25 to 30% of that taxes paid on the full building. With the agreement to terminate the TID and to go to the pilot agreement with WHPC, the amount of the $91,000 base was calculated based on the anticipated city share of taxes for the full value of the building. So under the current situation, the city would be receiving a lesser amount in pilot, but it would continue to receive its share of the taxes on that 25% of the building that's taxable. It doesn't quite add up to the 91,000, but we are trying to get something that would be close, but also recognizing the constraints on WHPC.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it seems clear. I mean, the 91,000 is no longer a thing. It's just not. And so the question is, what is fair to both? And I see, you know, a almost $40,000 difference dropping off in 2036. That is significant. But at the same time, we want to promote workforce housing. You know, I'm looking ahead, wondering, is there any way to use our workforce housing TID 3 extension, if we take it, to address this dilemma, but that's.
Can I also, I just maybe not to beat a dead horse here, but then when the original pilot agreement was entered into, the city's assumption also was 0
100%.
taxes, 91,000 period, done and over with for as long as WHPC owns it. The only thing that changed is the assessor said, we can't do 0 or, you know, full tax exemption. We have to do, you know, we have to tax the 25%. Obviously, that adds money to our side of the ledger. So the corresponding adjustment should be a reduction in the pilot to keep everything the same as the city assumed and as WHPC assumed. So that's kind of where we're here. Why are we here other than to just reduce the amount of the pilot payment? So.
And did anybody contest what the tax assessor came up with?
No, by statute, it is possible that or not possible, there's an argument that the market should be taxed. The statute specifically says exempt to the extent of affordability. So alternatively, that means you can tax the market units. And not all, but I would say the majority of municipalities around the state have not taken that position. There are some that do tax the market pieces. Madison is one. Middleton clearly is as well.
And other properties in this situation with the makeup of market and affordable in Middleton. I don't know if you own all of them, but I just want to make sure we're being consistent.
Yeah, that is my understanding from talking with the assessor, that is his and his firm's interpretation, and they are applying that consistently.
Okay. Well, I'm inclined to ask everyone to work together on extending the affordable workforce housing requirement beyond that 15 years to 30 years. And regarding the how much of what the annual base amount should be, I guess I would ask, would you all be willing to try to reach a compromise between the recommended pilot and what the WHPC is proposing? Because it sounds like through 2035, everything's good. It's the same. It's just that drop off in 2036. Is there any compromise that can be reached?
Just to clarify, I'm not sure where the 15 years comes from, because from our perspective, as long as we own it, if it's 15 years, 20, 30, 40, it will be affordable. So I'm not sure why
I'm looking at, this is the email message from, Mike.
I mean, we are required under the pilot to maintain our level of affordability as long as we own it, so I'm just not following the 15 years.
Well, I guess what I'm seeing is it says WHPC and it lists all the percentages and the rest at market for a period of 15 years. And there is a statement about given your purpose, but I guess
I think
I
we
don't
were
know if
merely
that's-
trying to mirror what the agreement was with Impact.
I don't know if
was
that's built
15 years.
into the wording of the agreement.
Again, to Lee's point, as long as we own it and we're exerting tax exempt
Sure.
status, we have to comply, with the affordability requirements outlined in the original agreement. We have no choice.
Matt, I would just want to since that's the case, it should not be a problem to have it in writing that as long as you own this property, it will remain.
Again, as long as
Yeah.
we're addressing the shortfall that we feel we're realizing in 2036 and beyond, or 2037 and beyond, as long as that's addressed, consistent with what we agreed to 2 years ago, then I think we'd be fine with that.
Bill, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think you raised an interesting point about the city's affordable housing fund that could be available as part of the extension of TID 3, and that's not something that we had considered when we were putting this together. I'm wondering if there might be an option to work out an agreement with what WHPC is asking for here, with the possibility that we reopen that. If there is interest in the city of seeking that the other units at some point in the future transition to affordable units, and being able to utilize funds from that TID extension to help make up the financial gap that would be in place for that movement. And that's something we have not discussed. I don't know how feasible that is, but that might be another solution to both close the financial gap and promote the city's goal of additional affordable units.
I like that idea.
We'd be receptive to that line of discussion and negotiation. Bill.
Okay.
I mean, there's certainly a need here.
Yes.
Our 80%
Oh, yes.
units are full all the time. There's a waiting list. So adding more 80% units, that we think that would be in the best interest of the needs that are here in the city of Middleton.
Okay. All right. So Bill, is this enough direction for you and Matt?
Yeah, I think so. I think that we can take this direction and work together and work on some reopener language, for lack of a better term, that could address that goal when that TIF extension is available.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you
Appreciate it.
very much, Mike. Okay. All right, moving on. We have our second agreement. Contract is amendment number 3 to engineering services agreement with MSA for construction phase services in the amount of $35,000 for Lake Street and Dewey Court reconstruction. And this comes to us from the Public Works Committee.
Sure. On behalf of Public Works, I move that we accept that.
Thank you.
This is Jackson, I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions?
A comment
Okay.
came up at our Public Works meeting on this was, this is as a result of some increasing costs in the project that appear to be inevitable due to, I guess, some soil contamination and things like that. Okay, Sean's nodding his head.
Sean's nodding his head. Yeah, well, I wondered about that. Sean, can you tell us what kind of contamination that is? And who put it there?
That's what started it, but it was a whole series of unfortunate events. But so there used to be a mobile station where there is now I'll call it the north parking lot for Harbor Athletic.
Okay.
Used to be a gas station there. And so we found some gasoline and diesel in the soil. It had a clean bill of health from DNR many, many years ago, had monitoring wells, and yet soil was contaminated right where we needed to put water main.
Okay.
But we also ran into some issues on Dewey Court and crossing Allen Boulevard, and a storm sewer in conflict with our sanitary sewer, which was causing it not to drain. So it just seemed like every day something different had gone wrong. And so MSA was out there much, much longer than anyone would have anticipated.
Okay. And we have no recourse to try to recoup some money for the contaminated soil from like a polluter pays fund?
None that I know of. It's not even terribly uncommon. It's just always unfortunate when we find these kinds of things. But, the contractor was really flexible in bouncing around what they could work on at any given time. So we didn't get to follow the schedule that they had laid out, but they were able to make progress most days.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving amendment number 3 to engineering services agreement with MSA for construction phase services in the amount of $35,000 for Lake Street and Dewey Court reconstruction, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to our third agreement, it's the property maintenance services agreement with B&E Construction and Remodeling, and this also comes to us from the Public Works Committee.
Sure, on behalf of Public Works, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this agreement for property maintenance services with B&E. I don't think there's any city attorney approval required on this. If there is,
Okay.
so be it. Have it done. Otherwise, Sean's nodding his head. Okay.
All right, so we have a motion.
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
In here.
Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the property maintenance services agreement with B&E Construction and Remodeling signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to bids and quotes, we have one award of bid to Carico Aquatic Resources, Inc. in the amount of $78,350 for the pool feature pump and strainer replacements project. Who would like to move approval?
Okay, Lorman will make a motion that we approve this.
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Thank you. All right, any discussion, questions?
Kylie has input or not. It is what it is.
Charlie, you got
It
any
is.
input on this?
It is what it
None?
is.
She's
Okay.
a thumbs up. We get a thumbs up from Kylie. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the award of bid to Carico Aquatic Resources, Inc. in the amount of $78,350 for the pool feature pump and strainer replacements project signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to miscellaneous. Let's do the general fund third quarter 2024 financial reports and then get back to the budget. And then if we have time, we can do the investment reports or we can do those next time, Bill.
Sure, and I could be fairly brief with both of these if you'd like. I've kind of given the bottom line news for the third quarter reports that we are projecting a surplus of a little over 400,000. That's a combination of some revenues that are above budget, the most notable of which is investment income. If I go to that page, we had budgeted 500,000 for the general fund share of investments. Last year, we had a significant surplus, and that was largely driven by investment income. I should note that the year-to-date number here, this 2.2 million, that is before doing allocations to the other funds because we do a pooled cash system. So during the year, it's all recorded in the general fund, and then we allocate it out to the different funds based on their share of cash. We're projecting 850,000, which I hope is a conservative number, and that does not include any anticipated unrealized gain on the value of our investments due to market conditions. As interest rates are dropping, those investments that we have that are locked in will gain in value, kind of the opposite of what we saw in the rising interest rate environment. So that number may be higher, but I think this is a reasonable estimate. On the expenditure side, these are based on numbers provided by the departments for the most part as part of their budget submittals. We are anticipating some savings from vacancies as we typically do. Police department, even though we are, I think, at full staffing now and with some positions coming off of field training, we did earlier in this year have some vacancies, and that's driving expenditures under budget for police field services. We're also seeing that to an extent with community services with that position, some of the senior center positions, and then within the overall parks, conservatory, and forestry to a lesser extent. So bottom line, total, if we look at revenues compared to expenditures, is that projected surplus of 411,000. And that may grow, but we'll have better information as we get closer to the end of the year.
Great.
And would you like me to give a brief investment update now, or do you want to wait and come back to that?
Briefly, sure. That'd be great.
Yeah, so very brief. The big news is that interest rates have started to come down in the market. Federal Reserve lowered the federal funds rate by 50 basis points, and markets pricing in another anticipated 50 basis point reduction by the end of the year. When we look at our beginning of the third quarter, our weighted average yield of our portfolio was at 4.34%. You can see that's dipped a little bit to 4.11% in September. The green line, which is the 90-day Treasury bill, that's also started to come down. In response, we've been looking at when we have investment funds available, trying to place where we can within our ladder and looking out in that 3 to 5 year range of where we can lock investments in, and being willing to accept rates that are lower than what short-term funds are paying to provide that security of having rates locked in for a longer period of time. So over the last month, we've had $11 million of investments either maturing, or we had some callable investments that were called. We've placed those at interest rates of between 3.6 and as much as 5%. As we've been looking at the analysis, even if we can lock in at 4.5%, we feel that gives us good protection for the longer term. So the goal is not to maximize short-term returns, but look at a balanced portfolio over time and try to dampen out those fluctuations in interest rates.
Great.
That's all, unless there are questions.
Thank you for that. I had a question, which I know we'll come to next time, but look forward to hearing your recommendations for how to use the surplus.
Mhm.
And maybe it'll even grow. That would be nice. Any questions for Bill? Or comments other than good job, Bill? No? Okay, then let's go back to the budget, because I want to make sure that we didn't leave an not balanced budget. So can we look at the general fund first? So there's the 53,928, and we needed 4,000 more to get that.
Yeah, if I add this in just temporarily, the gap to bring that position to full-time is $3,077. So we're very close.
Okay. Suggestions from anyone?
Well, again, I think getting back to the position for the planner. This was brought on by the city. We created this need not out of necessity, but out of desire. And I'm just not, behind it as much maybe as others, because I, again, support more of building up HR and that type of staffing levels. And so I think we're going to have to maybe look at that, in my opinion. And I've heard from constituents. So, we understand the internal workings of it and the drain it puts on staff, maybe to say, well, we don't have enough people to do what you'd like at Stone Horse. So that means our staff having to run out there and unlock bathroom doors and change light bulbs and clean up a mess. But we created that mess by creating Stone Horse Green. However, the staffing levels of the city are what they are, and the complexity of staffing, legalities around not having adequate management of staff in terms of people to make sure we're following regulations, so on and so forth. I think also has a higher priority. So I think we have to look at, do we want to take care of our city staff and their development and their growth and their health and their mental and physical health and all their needs by making sure we have adequate staff to handle that and make some sacrifices elsewhere. And if we don't do what needs to get done at Stone Horse, we turn to our community and say, we'll volunteer and help. Please.
Yes, Abby.
Sorry, I don't think I've done a very good job explaining the position because the way that it's proposed right now, it would not increase hours allocated to Stone Horse Green programming, and it would also not decrease hours. It would be the same. The additional request for the halftime would be to help with other related projects for city planning. Primarily, we are administering $5 million in grant funding right now, which we have to stop applying at this point. Like we're going to have to say no. And I just wanted to make it clear. And I think maybe I didn't name the position well because it seems to be a branding thing. This would not change anything that's happening right now at Stone Horse Green. What it would do is it would alleviate what we're bumping up against right now with our current staff, which is, we have a very enthusiastic staff of 4 team members that want to apply for every grant that we see that we know meets some of the city's goals or aligns with something that's in the strategic plan. But we're having to, I'm telling them no, because if we can't successfully complete the projects that we already have budgeted and funded, then and successfully administer the funds that we already have, then we shouldn't be going after any new or additional funding. So obviously it's a council decision to make.
Yep. Thank you. Wait, Abby, come back for a sec. So if this position were to be increased to 3/4 time,
Yep.
could that
would the
still be
city
helpful?
still be required to pay the full health and dental benefits under that scenario?
Yeah.
Okay, so in my opinion, obviously not my decision, but I would not recommend that the city council fund a position where we're paying full health and dental and not getting the full-time benefits of a position.
Yep.
I mean, to me, that just wouldn't, given the cost to provide benefits, it would not be a good use of city funding to not get the full back.
Well, and I think that's a bigger discussion to have because honestly, I don't know why we do pay. Is that required under state law to pay 100% of benefits for part-time employees?
Once you get above a certain hour.
Once you get above, what's the threshold?
30 hours, so 75%.
30 hours, okay. Because I was part-time for a long time and all my benefits were prorated, except my retirement contribution, which was just a percentage. I guess what I would ask though, Abby, is the, maybe not as, I don't want to say inefficient, but would you still benefit from having that set aside the principle of not thinking it's a good idea? Would your department still benefit from having that additional quarter time position?
It would essentially be, we would get 10 hours per week of assistance with general planning responsibilities. So yes, there would be a benefit, but if it were a full-time exempt position, we would get 20 hours plus, as we know, almost every salaried employee is working more than 40 hours a week.
Mhm.
So to me, if you're already covering the cost of the benefit, you might as well get the full value of the position. But it would still be beneficial to have somebody for 10 more hours, yes.
Okay.
And I
Go
do
ahead,
have
Bill.
another thought if you are looking for options and suggestions. If we're really just talking about this gap of 3,000, that's a very small amount out of an almost $25 million general fund budget. One specific area we could look at is the HR request also has currently $5,000 of additional funding for recruitment expenses. We had previously indicated that some of those expenses could come from when there are vacancies, because typically there is an opening and there would be a savings from vacancies that can be used for recruitment. So you could take 3,000 from that with that same philosophy. We have budgeted in 2025 150,000 of anticipated savings from vacancies, and has not changed from 2024 to 2025. As our budget grows, it would make sense to incrementally increase that. So you could increase that from 150 to 153. And I think that'd be a very reasonable estimate to do to close that $3,000 gap.
Okay,
Now, and the other, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Well, I guess, and the other thing I would expect is if we're going to increase HR staffing, they're going to be expected to simply do more. And I mean, I don't want to get into the details of where and when we hire recruiting and when we don't, but you know, maybe there's some things we have to take on ourselves.
Okay, well, I like that idea, Bill, of plugging that $3,077 hole through that. What was that?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. All right, so that should balance the general fund operating budget. And where did we leave off on the capital?
Switch to capital.
Oh, and that reminds me, I saw your note. There's some other tweaks that needed to be made. So let's talk about the airport for a second. I'm sorry, it was on a different thing.
Yeah, sorry. On the capital, just to answer your question, with the changes that have been discussed previously for the general capital borrowing, the amount is currently at 4,150,500. So it's slightly under where we had been.
What about if we took 50,000 out of the vehicle replacement plan funding and put some of this year's surplus, put 50,000 of this year's surplus into that fund?
Yeah, I think that could be done.
Then we also had talked about earlier today, Bill and Brian and I talked about how if the stormwater utility referendum passes, that will lead to an increase in the utility costs for the city as a whole. But we learned at the stormwater meeting, Alder Jackson and I were there at the first one, and we learned that the airport is actually the biggest city customer because of the pavement out there. So that doesn't affect our capital or our general fund, but that is something that needs to be added into the budget, I guess, as a contingency for, like everything else. If it passes, there will be additional costs, and maybe smaller costs elsewhere in the city will be looked at.
Yeah, we'll review that, and if there are any updates needed, can report that at the next meeting or when we have the meeting on November 6th. But as you indicated, the largest by far municipal customer of stormwater utility is the airport. They're currently paying a little over 21,000 in stormwater utility fees, and assuming the referendum passes, it would be an additional 22,372. And then the airport would also have that $4,000 payment to the general fund for the cost recovery that was previously discussed.
Okay. Looking at so we still have to come up with So going back to the
Go to
capital.
capital. Yeah, we were previously just under 4.2 million, so now we're at 4.1,500,000 with the adjustments that have been made so far.
And our target,
We had set a target unofficially of 4.2 million,
oh,
so we're actually under.
oh, well then, how did that happen? Why did I think we had 150,000 to?
Can run through and just make sure that I didn't miss anything that we had discussed. Let's see, we had no changes there. Park and Rec, we've added in the 8,000 for the urban forestry plan.
Bus stop
We've
improvements.
added in
back.
the 15,000 for the bus stop improvements. Remove the 12,000 for the dispatch desk replacement. I do have Mayflower shown as being pushed back a year. I think this may be part of it, is that we had moved up the high road design, but showing that as being funded with escrow funds rather than
Okay.
general capital.
So that helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I was
that's
thinking
part of
we
what
would
helped to
use
lower it.
85,000 from borrowing, but we don't
Yeah.
have to. Okay.
Century Allen included but funded with TIF 5. These changes just affect stormwater utility for the leaf picker Vector and the 1-ton truck.
Oh, I don't think the 1-ton truck is in there.
Yeah, you're correct. That formula is
Not
not
affecting our-
pulling in correctly. Okay.
Okay.
And then
well, that-
stormwater or the vehicle replacement plan funding of 50,000 of that were coming from surplus is the other change.
Well, we can take that back up to 650.
To the, yeah.
Okay. And the 25,000 for Old Creek Road, that was,
That is included.
so is there anything else, Alders, that you would like to see put back in? That's at a reasonable, like I see the Elmwood traffic calming. I'm like, okay, that could be good, but I recognize that leads to staff having more that they need to do. Well, I guess we put Middleton Hills back in. What about the boundary marking and delineation? That's a $20,000 project that is in parks or conservancy lands. Kylie, do you have any thoughts on that? Oh, and also we did have a question about that tile break restoration, whether the Friends $50,000 contribution could be used for this too.
For the tile break, that those grant funds were specifically earmarked for the creek corridor.
Okay.
So, but I can still check with him. We have a board meeting scheduled in the next month on any other additional funds for that tile break area.
Okay.
As far as boundary marking and delineation, we have quite a bit of work that needs to be done throughout our conservancy and trail and just easement areas. Just to continue marking that, we're working with our building inspector to notify residents and kind of working through that process all through the Pheasant Branch, our Bach Prairie side, and Orchid Heights to notify residents, but that area just alone is $6,000. So we can always use funds to help continue our efforts of reestablishing conservancy lands.
Yep. I think it's a good investment. I think it's protective of the city's property. And so I could support that. Alders, any objections to putting the boundary marking back in? Because this one too, I've seen in previous years and it gets taken out.
Well, I mean, do we have to put it all in there? Put a partial in?
Well-
Make it more palatable?
I think I'd rather just get as much done as possible. And now where does that leave us, Bill? we're still ahead of what the original proposal was. I'd be inclined to put the tile break restoration back in. I think we've underfunded conservancy lands in the past. This is the area to the east of the parking lot at the top of the hill, Gaylord Nelson. where it
Yeah,
crosses.
yeah, just low or below that.
Well, any objection? You're the Conservancy Lands Chair. Any objection?
No, there's gonna be no objection on it, obviously.
Okay.
Um,
And I, those are some of the low ticket things that, so now we've shaved off $19,000 from the original proposal.
Yeah.
So,
And I was going to say that, it would be an option to just leave it at that point, and that way, if there's any adjustments that come up between now and November, when the council's considering it, leaves a little room to make adjustments.
great. Alders, is this do you need an action from us to recommend this to the council?
I think, yeah, there would be a motion to recommend the budget, including all of the adjustments that have been discussed, and then that would be on the council agenda for the 6th.
Okay, who wants to make that motion?
This is Jackson. I'll make that motion to recommend the budget to the council.
With all the changes discussed today.
All the changes discussed.
Gorman, a second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I just want to thank everybody who's been involved, the directors, the finance staff, city administrator, colleagues, everybody who's watching. This is always a challenging but very rewarding and satisfying activity to really be shaping what our city is going to be doing in the coming year. And I appreciate everybody's attention to all the details. There are many of them. Okay, all those in favor of approving or recommending the budget to the council with all the changes discussed today signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We have reached the end of our agenda and we are adjourned. Thank you.